Hi, this is Diver Jessica from Friday Incident File. At 3:50 p.m. on May 1st, 2016, in the city of Ansan, a body was found stuffed in a burlap sack near a drainage ditch by a levee in Daebudo, Danwon district. The body was found brutally cut below the navel, with only the lower half remaining. The gender was identified as male, however the foot size was unusually small, 220 millimeters. He was estimated to be small-built, about 160 centimeters tall. The body had been abandoned recently. Decomposition was just starting. The Ansan Danwon police station, responsible for the area, quickly assembled an investigation team and began an extensive search to locate the remaining body parts. They deployed 900 officers from 10 units along with drones. And then, 2 days later, on May 3rd, the upper body was found at the northern end of Daebudo, near the Bangamayori dock on the Siwaho side. It was wrapped in a blanket and placed inside a burlap sack. However, in a gruesome turn of events, all the organs from the upper body had been removed. Fortunately, the fingerprints on the body were not completely damaged. Based on this, the police were finally able to identify the victim. The victim was Mr. Choi. He was 40 years old. First, we looked at the phone call history. From this, a few people he had been in regular contact with surfaced. The police focused their attention on a man named Joe, who had been living with Choi. On May 5th at 1:50 p.m., the police stormed into the victim Mr. Choi's residence in Yeonsugu, Incheon. When they entered the house, they noticed blood spatter on the walls that had not been completely cleaned. Spatter bloodstains refer to the state where blood has been sprayed into the air and scattered. After analyzing the blood, it was confirmed to be Mr. Choi's. So it becomes undeniably clear that Mr. Choi was indeed murdered inside this house. The police strongly interrogated Joe, the cohabiting male, and shortly after, they obtained a full confession and immediately arrested him. The arrested man was 30-year-old Jo Sung-ho at the time. From the moment the body was found, identifying the victim and capturing the culprit turned out to be relatively uncomplicated. Choi Seong-ho did not attempt to flee. Despite intense police questioning, he responded willingly. He appeared quite cooperative. However, it did not take long before he began to change his story, repeatedly altering his statements regarding his motive for the murder. The process of uncovering the full story became more complicated. First, 4 months earlier on January 2nd, 2016, Jo Seong-ho, he got a job at a motel in Incheon, working at the counter and managing guest rooms. And 2 days later, on the 4th, he met the victim, Ms. Choi, who had also started working there as an employee. The two of them quickly became close while living together in the accommodation assigned by the motel owner. The victim, Mr. Choi, was 10 years older than Jo Seong-ho, but both of them shared their struggles from the past, and this naturally led them to develop a close, almost sibling-like relationship. Then, in February, both of them were not working diligently, which made the boss dissatisfied, and he ended up firing them both at the same time. So they would be evicted immediately. At this time, Mr. Choi suggested to Jo, she suggested that they find a place together and live as roommates. For Seong-ho, this was a prime chance to cut down on living costs, so he accepted. They found a studio in Yeonsudong. The deposit was 300,000 won. Rent was 280,000 won. During this period, the lease was signed under Choi's name, while Jo was responsible for paying the utility bills. Finally, on February 26th, their dangerous cohabitation began. At first, there were no issues. Then, about 2 weeks later, on March 11th, 2016, Choi brought up a completely unexpected topic to Jo. He suggested that he would compensate her if they engaged in sexual activity. For reference, there was some speculation about whether Choi was homosexual or not. It's confirmed he had a girlfriend before. Additionally, they ran a pet cafe together. The business became hard to run. It closed a year and a half before the incident. It was also revealed that he had done various jobs to pay off his loan debt. When we examine his various jobs, some peculiarities emerge. He even had a minor role in an adult film. He also worked as a manager for adult film actresses. He also worked as a male karaoke helper. Various odd jobs. He did all sorts of jobs. At that time, Cho Seong-ho was under significant financial strain. He was under financial pressure. As a result, he accepted this unsettling proposal. In return, he got 30,000 won each time. He agreed to 300,000 won. Afterward, the issue arose when Mr. Choi didn't pay the agreed amount on time. While the two were drinking at a pub, an argument broke out. Choi Seong-ho then asked, "When are you going to pay me the money you promised last time?" Then Choi said, "I got fired from the motel. I've been unemployed for a month. How can I have any money?" He mumbled something evasively. This incident caused a major rift between the two. Later, Choi picked up a fork from the table and yelled, "Hey, you bastard, get out!" Choi's shouting and aggressive behavior pushed Jo Seong-ho over the edge, leading him to feel intense resentment as he faced the grim reality of not getting paid and being evicted. Finally, on April 1st, Jo Seong-ho purchased a 19cm kitchen knife and hid it in the cupboard of the one-room apartment where they lived together. Additionally, on April 12th, which was just the day before the murder took place, he managed to hide a 35cm hammer that he had brought from the factory behind the large refrigerator located near the entrance. On the other hand, during this period, Choi managed to get a job at another nearby motel, where he stayed and only came back home every other day. On the day of the incident, April 13th, at midnight, when Jo Seong-ho entered the house, he happened to come across Choi lying on the bed. So, he found himself inside the house. At this point, Choi Seong-ho requested the 90,000 won he was owed, which included the deposit of 30,000 won he had initially paid. He assured that he would leave without causing any trouble if he received the full amount. However, at that moment, Choi let out a scoff and remarked, "You enjoyed it too, so what are you talking about?" After that, he started mocking and cursing, saying things like, "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Your parents are just like you." At that moment, Jo Seong-ho snapped. No longer able to contain himself, he retrieved the hammer he had hidden behind the refrigerator and attacked Choi. When he tried to escape, Choi kicked him in the groin and knocked him onto the bed. Following this, he relentlessly struck Choi's face, chest, and other areas approximately 10 times with the hammer. A moment later, Choi no longer put up any resistance. He confirmed she was unconscious. Then he took out a kitchen knife hidden in the cupboard. And then, he proceeded to stab the abdomen and chest multiple times, attacking with great force. Keep in mind, this account is solely based on Choi Seong-ho's statement. At that moment, Choi Seong-ho stated that he had no intention of killing Mr. Choi and argued that the act was purely spontaneous. But when Choi refused to hand over the money and instead hurled insults at his parents, he ended up killing her. But wait, he obviously planned ahead by stashing the weapon beforehand. It doesn't quite align with the idea of an impulsive murder. Additionally, Jo went as far as mutilating the body. Do you recall how the remains were initially found? He removed all of Choi's organs with the kitchen knife. He also cut the body into pieces. Then, he put the large organs into 5 trash bags. He threw them away at a recycling center. He flushed the smaller pieces down the toilet and drain. This was to destroy the evidence. Afterward, he left the dismembered body in the studio apartment with the organs removed. And then, on April 25th, 12 days later, he completely separated the upper and lower halves of the body. It's clear there was intent to dispose of the body. April 26, 11:35 p.m. Choi Seong-ho had previously rented a car and he placed the body in the trunk, transferring it into 2 burlap sacks. Then, at 1:47 a.m., he arrived at Dae-budo and disposed of the bag containing the lower body and the bag containing the upper body, one after the other. After that, he calmly returned home. So, when the police heard up to this point, the decisive motive for the murder appears to be because Choi did not receive the money. However, the issue at hand was to determine whether this was impulsive or premeditated. Why did he mutilate the body so much? Regarding this, Choi Sung-woo, he said the body was too heavy. The smell from decomposition was unbearable. So, he had no choice. However, isn't that method excessively cruel? He even removed all the organs. So this means one could interpret this as pent-up resentment or anger that finally surfaced on that particular day. So it could be interpreted that Seong-ho always had the intention to kill Mr. Choi. In the midst of this, he happened to make insulting remarks about his parents, which led to the murder and the reckless mutilation of the body. But, on the other hand, Cho Sung-woo, he insists time and again that the murder was never premeditated and occurred spontaneously. You see, this could lead to a huge difference in the sentence. A lighter sentence is possible. In fact, during the trial, he claimed that he had brought the weapon beforehand just to intimidate. He keeps arguing he never meant to kill. And at this point, something else comes up. He claims to have anger management issues. He argues he was mentally impaired. This makes him appear to be a very calculated and cunning person. Looking at his actions after the murder, his unruffled demeanor is quite unsettling. On his Facebook, he posted his life plans for the future after committing the murder. Did he think it was a perfect crime? Usually a first murder, and he dismembered the body. How could he stay so calm? So at this point, experts judge that Jo Seong-ho has sociopathic traits. A typical person would not kill over being ignored. People do not kill for that reason. Moreover, we have testimonies from Cho Seong-ho's classmates. In high school, he smashed a cat's paw with a stone. Smashing it, he abused animals without any remorse. Usually, he was very quiet. If he felt disrespected, he became very sensitive. He had a personality that was both impulsive and extremely expressive of his emotions, which aligns perfectly with the traits of a sociopath. One particularly notable aspect is that after committing the crime, Choi never attempted to flee, not even once, until he was apprehended. After the crime, he said he avoided watching the news or reading articles. He went as far as to make plans to watch a movie with his girlfriend he was familiar with. Moreover, he casually posted updates on social media. In other words, it seems that after committing the murder, he did not fall into any feelings of remorse or fear. Interestingly, in that post, he mentioned that he plans to save 2 billion won within 10 years and fulfill his ultimate dream. He exhibited a strong fixation on ensuring his survival and accumulating wealth. This is quite different from the usual behavior of a psychopath. In October 2016, Seong-ho Cho was sentenced to life imprisonment at the end of his first trial. However, in April 2017, the High Court commuted his sentence to 27 years. At this time, the trial's main issue was unusual. The main issue was pinpointing the exact moment when Mr. Choi passed away. In the first trial, the court determined that Jo Sung-ho fatally stabbed the victim multiple times with a kitchen knife while she was still alive. The High Court determined that by the time the stabbing with the weapon occurred, which was considered the secondary attack, the victim had already passed away. But it's questionable whether this justifies a reduced sentence. Considering the victim was already deceased, the act was deemed as merely excessive force rather than a more serious offense. This led to the reduction of the sentence. Moreover, it seems that Choi's anger escalated significantly because he was on the verge of being evicted without receiving his money, and this factor was somewhat considered in the judgment. Later, Choi Seong-ho accepted the appellate court's decision. He is now in a domestic prison. He is expected to be released in May 2043. By then, he will be 57 years old. While the case was officially closed, the debates surrounding it continue. This was due to the secondary harm right after his identity was revealed. In fact, until just before his arrest, he was actively posting on his blog and Facebook. So his personal information is much more known than other criminals. Due to the nature of the case, there were also many suspicions about whether he might be homosexual. It was also revealed that, before he met Choi, he actually had a girlfriend at that time. However, unfortunately, During this process, his ex-girlfriend and family members' personal information was exposed, leading to unintended victims. Reflecting on it, these kinds of incidents seem to be happening more often lately. When the identity of a criminal is usually disclosed, people start tracking their Instagram or Facebook accounts. Moreover, once the list of followers is disclosed, identifying their family, friends, and acquaintances becomes quite straightforward. Of course, while it may be acceptable to criticize a criminal or perpetrator who is deemed a societal evil, yet, targeting individuals solely because of their association with the case leads to unnecessary secondary victimization. Our Constitution, Article 13, Clause 3, has this provision. Every citizen is protected from being treated unfairly due to the actions of their family members. The crime was committed by Sung-ho Jo alone. We must make it clear. His acquaintances or family members are not involved. Today's case. This was the case of Jo Seong-ho. He had sociopathic tendencies and dreamed of the perfect crime. In some ways, this perpetrator appeared even more confident and calculated than the psychopaths we frequently hear about these days. This leaves us with an uneasy feeling about whether we can completely trust their statements. Moreover, it also vividly illustrates that the public disclosure of a heinous criminal's identity can potentially result in additional victims. A recent poll shows that the majority of the public, about 9 out of 10, are in favor of revealing the identities of violent offenders. At this point, the usual criteria for disclosure are that the crime was brutal, significant harm occurred, or if it is deemed necessary for the public interest in preventing future crimes. But the real issue is these criteria are still unclear. Thus, there are still several aspects within our society that require improvement. At the same time, the public also needs to be mature enough to recognize the identity of the criminal while refraining from indiscriminate attacks and criticism of unrelated individuals. This has been Jessica from Friday Incident File. We covered the Daebudo dismemberment murder involving Choi Sung-ho.